Welcome back. This is part 3 of the Puffs and Pico Bandana Cowl video tutorial. In parts 1 and 2, we created the lower portion of our bandana cowl. Now in part 3, we'll build up the neck. So now you have this beautiful bandana cowl, and it's almost done, but you can see all the little details that we've put in. And you could totally wear it like this, but I like for my bandana cowls to be a little more substantial because we get cold here. So I like to build a little bit more into the neck, and that's what we're going to do next. So you're going to take your cowl and turn it around so that you're at the back, but you want the right side facing you. And the best way to know if it's the right side is you'll see this nice little ridge here, and your puff stitches and your forked clusters will stick out a little bit more on this side. Gives it all that nice texture. So you have the right side facing you, but the back of the cowl, and you want to attach your yarn pretty well in any of these stitches. Let's go with this one. And then chain 1. And you're going to single crochet around this entire cowl. Now, you're going to place 2 single crochets in the end of each row, because you see these are all row ends right here. So we're going to place 2 single crochet in this row end, and then 2 single crochets in this row end, just like that. Each row end gets 2 single crochets, and you're going to continue that way all the way around. And when you hit this ring that's at the very front, you're also going to put 2 single crochets inside that ring. And then you're going to continue the rest of the way around until you get back to the beginning. And then you're going to slip stitch to close. Now you don't have to be too finicky about it. As long as you have 90 stitches when you're finished, then you're doing just fine. Okay, now that we've worked the ends of each row and through that ring, we're going to slip stitch to the first stitch to join. All right, and that is row 1 of the neck portion completed. You should have 90 stitches around. Now for round 2 of the neck, we're going to turn and chain 1. And then you're going to place 1 half double crochet in each stitch around, and then slip stitch to the first stitch. Okay, so we've placed a half double crochet in each stitch around, and we've slip stitched to the first stitch to join. You should have 90 stitches, and now we're going to proceed to round 3. So we're going to turn, and this round is worked in the back loop only. So we're going to chain 3, which counts as your first double crochet, and working in the back loop, we're going to double crochet in each stitch around. And then once we get back to the beginning, we're going to do the same. We're going to slip stitch to the first stitch to join. Okay, now that we've placed a double crochet in the back loop only of each stitch around, we're going to slip stitch to the first stitch to close. And that is round 3 completed. You should have 90 stitches around. And now for round 4, we're going to turn and we're going to chain 1. Now we're going to be working the forked cluster in the round. So the way we do this is we start our first forked cluster in the same stitch that we just chained from. Just like that. And then you continue just the same way you would normally do a forked cluster. See? And there's your first forked cluster. And then we're going to chain 2. And starting in the next stitch, we're going to forked cluster. There you go. And chain 2. And that's the basic pattern. You forked cluster, then chain 2, and you repeat that all the way around until all of the stitches have been worked. Okay, so I got almost all the way through my neck portion on my cowl before I realized that I did that first forked cluster absolutely wrong. So I'm going to do it again for you here. See, I pulled through all loops, but you're just supposed to pull through all but one, right like that. And then you finish it. And that is what the first fork cluster should look like. That's a little embarrassing. So yes, please don't do it the way that you saw just previously in my video. Please do it this way. Okay, so you've done your last fork cluster and chain 2. And now you're going to slip stitch to your first forked cluster. Just like that. Okay. And that is round 3 of the neck done. And you should still have 90 stitches. And you should also have 30 forked cluster stitches. Now for round 5, we're going to turn and chain 3. And you're going to place a double crochet in each stitch and chain space around. Okay, now that you've double crocheted in each stitch and chain space around, you're going to slip stitch to this first stitch. And now round 5 is completed, and you should have 90 stitches. And now for round 6, we're going to turn and chain 3. That counts as your first double crochet. Next, we're going to puff stitch in the next stitch. and then skip one stitch, and then double crochet in the next stitch, and then puff stitch in the next stitch, I didn't do it enough times that time. There we go. And skip one stitch. So the basic pattern is to double crochet, puff stitch, skip a stitch. And you will continue that way all the way around, ending with a skip stitch just before this first stitch that you worked. So double crochet, puff stitch, skip stitch. Okay, so you've worked your way around, ending with a skip one stitch, and now you will slip stitch to the first stitch. And if you're having trouble figuring out where this first double crochet is, you just count your chains. 1, 2, 3. There you go. Okay, now that is round 6 completed. You should have 90 stitches, which includes 30 puff stitch. Now for round 7, we're going to turn and chain 3. And now you're going to double crochet in each stitch around. Okay, so once you've double crocheted into each stitch around, you're going to slip stitch to the first stitch. And that is round 7 completed. You should have 90 stitches. Now for round 8, we're going to turn. And this is another forked cluster row. So we're going to chain 1 and begin our first forked cluster in the first stitch. Again, I did this forked cluster incorrectly, so please don't do it like this. Do it the way that I demonstrated earlier on in the video. Okay. And then we're going to chain 2, begin your next forked cluster in the next stitch. And chain 2. And that's the basic pattern, forked cluster, chain 2. You're going to continue that way all the way around till you get back to the beginning. Okay, so we've worked our last forked cluster, chain 2. Now we're just going to slip stitch to join. Make sure that you're slip stitching into the right place. That wasn't it. This is it here. There's your first forked cluster. And now round 8 is complete. You should have 90 stitches, which includes 30 forked clusters. And now for round 9, we're going to turn and chain 3. And now you're going to double crochet in each chain space and stitch around. So 2 double crochets in each chain 2 space, 1 double crochet in the top of each forked cluster. Okay, once you've placed a double crochet in each chain space and stitch around, now you're going to slip stitch into your first stitch. And that is round 9 completed, and you should have 90 stitches. So that is the row sequence for the neck portion. And now you're going to repeat that sequence of rows. That's rows 2 through 9. So every row except for the first single crochet row. If you would like a cowl like the one that I have pictured, I repeated rows 2 through 9 one more time. If you'd like a hooded cowl, then I'd recommend repeating it 2 to 3 more times, depending on how long and how tall you want your cowl. Okay, so I've repeated rounds 2 through 9, and so I have finished round 17, and now we're going to do round 18. So we're going to turn and chain 1, and now we're going to half double crochet in each stitch around, beginning with the first one here. Okay, and once you've worked your half double crochet into every stitch, you're going to slip stitch to join to the first stitch. And that is round 18 completed. You should have 90 stitches. Now for round 19, this is the final round. We're almost done, it's the home stretch. Okay, so you turn and you chain 1, and this round is going to be worked in the back loop only. So you're going to single crochet in each stitch around in the back loop only. Okay, once you've single crocheted into each stitch around, you're going to slip stitch to join to your first stitch. And then you can bind off, cut your yarn, bind off. And now you can weave in your ends and you're done. And now you have a beautiful new bandana cowl. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you'd like to see more from me, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel.